of the sun, and then all of a sudden, as they're filming, it gets completely dark, and then a few minutes later, however long it takes, it turns to light again. That is what this that's what this looked like. So once it gets completely dark, like darker than nighttime, there was like this like sense of confusion. It wasn't quite panic. I didn't feel like a sensation of panic, but like everyone was kind of like, what is going on here? And then a few moments later, the darkness, like it goes away, and then the sunset comes back, and the sun's like in the same place in the sky, except the colors are like even more vivid than I can describe from the first time around. They were completely different and just again undescribable. So once that happened, I mean, everyone's like the confusion sort of like was still kind of there, but it was like, okay, the sun's back. That's great. At that moment, though, when the sun came back, there was like this sensation of peace that was like all around me. Like it was like radiating through me, is around me, and like everywhere. And I remember right when there was right when the light came back, I remember seeing there were these two people like about the 100 or so feet in front of me, like I was describing, and they look like silhouettes, like anyone would during a sunset time frame. You see someone in the distance, they've got like just a black shadow silhouette kind of thing. And these people, I remember a detail in particular. They didn't look like they knew each other because they weren't standing next to each other. They were like farther apart. But all of a sudden, these two people, they turned into a bright white light. Like, and I could still see their silhouettes, but going from like a black, like dark shadow silhouette, they turned into light. And I could still see like their arms and legs, and it was so bright. And they were like looking at their hands, trying to like figure out what was going on. And then they looked at each other, even though it was like a super far distance. I could tell they looked at each other, and they started walking towards each other. The way that it looked like is like if you were to run into an old friend that you hadn't seen in years, and but you weren't expecting to run into them. It's just like a complete crazy surprise. That's what it looked like happened whenever they looked at each other, and they started like walking towards each other. And once they got towards each other, they like hugged each other. It was like, again, like they were old friends, but again, I could tell that they didn't know each other. But they walked towards each other. They hugged for a moment, and then they stepped back and looked at each other, maybe a few feet apart. And then a couple moments after they like let go of their hug, both of them started to lift off the ground, about 5 or 10 feet off the ground. And then once they got off to like kind of like the highest point, 5 or 10 feet off the ground, both of their bodies like burst into dust. And there's millions of little dust particles, and every particle of dust was glowing like this incredible bright light from every particle. And it formed this cloud that was like staying in. It floated above the ground, where their bodies were for a couple seconds, and then shortly after that cloud was floating there was a beam of light that just shot straight up into the sky. And the only way I can describe this light in like human terms is like whenever you've seen pictures of Las Vegas at night. And there you see like the Luxor hotel that has like the beam shooting straight up into the sky. That's what it looked like for both like one beam, then the second beam for the other person, and then there were starting to be other beams that were happening and just like taking all these people up into the sky, and it was like this incredible thing like I'd never seen before. But while this was happening, I knew it was like this has got to be the rapture. And then after seeing the two of them, there was another group of like 3 people that were like close to me. I didn't know who they were, but I saw these 3 people come together, and I remember this saying that I heard in the dream. It said, "It's all true. This is what they've been talking about for thousands of years." And I don't know if it was one of them that said it, but I heard those words, that it's all true. This is what they've been talking about for thousands of years. So then they hugged. Then these 3 people, they lifted off the ground. They burst into a cloud. And then the 3 of them shot up into the sky. And at this point, like I'm starting to get kind of like scared because it's not happened to me yet. Because I know that like been saved, and I felt like it should happen to me as well. And I called out to God, and I said, you know me, you know I'm on your side. So I remember saying that clearly. And so at this point, I started to lift off the ground also, and I've got this like minor sense of relief. I'm like, okay, whew, like I made it. But I kept going up, and I'm still on this, again, on this highway scene. But as I was floating up, I still hadn't turned to light. And I was getting kind of fearful, but I was like, well, maybe just turning to light hasn't happened yet, but I'm floating up, so I think maybe I'm okay. But again, there was still a lot of fear, and I was still very confused because I was not a part of this other group of people that were going up. Then I again start going up a little bit more, and I got just above like those green highway signs that you see out there. And once I got above this highway sign, just a couple feet above it, I started like floating back down again. And I ended up landing on, like, when you see those green highway signs, sometimes you can see like a little like metal walkway for like maintenance or whatever. I ended up landing on one of those, and I started like panicking and like crying like I've never cried in like this in earthly terms. And anyone that knows me knows that I don't really have like a whole lot of like emotional like inflection. There's not a lot that can bring me down. I'm a pretty happy guy, no matter what circumstances are. I do what I can to, I don't know, just, I think also maybe that happens just whenever you keep God first. Like there is always like a sense of happiness, like being salt and light. It's just kind of just part of who you are. So it was very unusual to me to be like crying and just like waterfalls coming out of my eyes practically. And I remember I was begging to God. I said, I begged to God more to let me go with the people I saw, and because with the people I saw that were taken, because I had accepted His Son. Why would you not let me go? So at this point again, I remember asking like, why won't you let me go? There started to be like an awareness that kicked in again. That about the vision, because there was a lot of like sensory overload that was going on with everything I had just described. And then I thought, I know being left behind is not something that would happen to me because God keeps His promises to His people. So maybe there's something you want to show me. And that's what I thought. I was like, maybe I'm being left behind right now for something that God wants to show me. And that's what we'll be getting to here in just a moment. And I was begging. That was the reason why. Like, please, like, still let me go. But there's just something that you want to show me here before I'm actually taken up. So as that thought passed through my mind, my appearance, and I felt like I was facing south originally when I was on this highway. I don't know if there's a detail there, but there was a sense of direction that I could feel. And I looked to the left, which would have been, I guess, east. If I was facing south. And I remember looking over at like what was like a soccer field or an empty field of some kind that was just off to the side of the highway. And all of a sudden, as I'm looking at this field, a couple of seconds later, I see hundreds of people swarm this field from every direction. Everyone was just swarming this field as quickly as possible. And they form like this like circle or a disc shape of just people in a circle in the middle of this field. So that's another detail that I remember, that they made like a circle. And at that point, one other thing that happened while I was still up there, there was a Bible that appeared in my hand all of a sudden, and I remember flipping through. Trying to figure out like why this was like what's going on. It's like I know Scripture reasonably well, and this was happening like while I was crying. And then we'll get to the people as that I saw moments after they stormed. So once all these people got to they filled this circle, I guess I ended up floating over to where they were, and then all of a sudden I went from like sort of just kind of floating through the air to them to I immediately appeared within the circle of people, and I was seeing all these different people around me, and they were panicking and crying like nothing